Welcome to Everything Co-op, bringing you information on how cooperatives can help improve your quality of life. This show is being sponsored by the National Co-op Bank, NCB. The NCB is dedicated to strengthening communities nationwide for the delivery of banking and financial services for the nation's cooperatives, their members, and other socially responsible organizations. For more information on the power of community ownership, visit ncb.coop. That's ncb.coop. Now stay tuned for your host, Vernon Oakes.
Good morning, everybody. This is Vernon Oakes, and the program is Everything Co-op. This morning, I'm just going to talk to you a bit about co-ops. Why do co-ops matter now more than ever? Why do co-ops matter now more than ever? Particularly when you look at everything that's happening around the world, Venezuela, Israel and Palestine, Iran, what's happening in the Middle East, period. You look at all of the upset and everything that's going on in the world and our administration. We're in a democracy, and I didn't vote for the current president, but he is still our president. And he's doing things that a lot of us don't like. And one of the reasons that we didn't vote for him. So why do co-ops matter now more than ever? So I want to welcome you to our program. And first I want to explain to you what a co-op is. A co-op is a business. It is a business model. Mostly people are trained on the capitalistic model of business. That model, capitalism, is how can you make the biggest profit for the investors. That's the main purpose of a capitalistic model. How do you make the most money for your investors, for your shareholders? And it's gotten to become, how do you make the most money for upper management? And too often a capitalistic model is an extractive model. It takes and it takes and it takes to turn raw materials, lumber, labor into profit for the shareholders. And those shareholders are mostly the folks with the most money in our economy. 1%ers or 10%ers. Those people that have the most money are mainly the ones that are investing in the stock market. So when this administration says the stock market is high, well, that affects the rich, the wealthy. Most people, everyday working, it doesn't affect it because most of them have not invested in the stock market, but their pensions may be in the market. So the market may really affect them, particularly long term. So a co-op is a business. It is a business that's created by its members for the benefit of its members, not for the benefit of stockholders, but for the benefit of its members. And I've dedicated 3 decades, almost 4 now of my life in the cooperative space, 13 years on this program talking about the benefits of co-ops. And through this program, I'm going to tell you why I've dedicated so much of my life. The underlying belief is that co-ops help people have a better quality of life, much better quality of life than a capitalistic model. It's the difference between business organized for investors versus business organized for people. So what would happen if the people who work in a business, shop in a business, or depend on a business actually owned it? So what would happen if the people who work in a business, shop in a business, or depend on a business actually own it? Well, ownership Ownership changes behavior. That's the first thing that would happen. Ownership changes behavior. When people own a business, they tend to think long-term rather than short-term. In the capitalistic model, too often managers are saying, how much profit can we make this quarter, this month, this quarter? Short-term vision. But if the people own the business, we're asking us, how do you create a business to serve us for the next generation? Much more long-term. How can we create a business that serves our children and our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren? Workers who are owners are more likely to stay with the company longer, share ideas for improvement, increase productivity, care about quality and customer service. Consumers who own the business are more likely to shop locally, support community initiatives, hold management accountable, and keep wealth circulating in the local economy. We'll get more into that when we talk about the different types of co-ops, but ownership transforms people from customers and employees into stakeholders with a voice and a vote. What would it be like if you worked in a business where you had voice and a vote and a share of the profits? And though the answers to those questions is why I've dedicated decades of my life in this co-op space. Once I learned about it, it changed my behavior and changed what I was interested in and what I loved. So today we're going to explore how cooperatives answers the question, what would happen if the people who work in a business, shop in a business, or depend on a business actually own it? What makes a cooperative different? The cooperative definition from the International Cooperative Alliance, it's an autonomous business of persons united voluntarily to meet their common economic, social, and cultural needs and aspirations through a jointly owned and democratically controlled enterprise. It's a long definition. I like mine. Mine is, a co-op is a business that's created by its owners for the benefit of its owners. But it's voluntary membership, democratically controlled, one member, one vote. Long-term thinking versus short-term, quarterly profits. So listeners, if you had a vote in every company you did business with, how would that change your relationship to that business? If you had a vote in every company you did business with, how would that change your relationship to that business? So most people have little influence over the businesses they patronize. Get some gas. Go to the barber shop or the beauty parlor. Go to the laundry. Take your clothes in. Come back and pick them up. Oh, you got to pay. But you have no influence on how that business operates. In a co-op, members can elect directors, and those directors are the one that creates the policies. If there are even major policies, they have to come back to the members. The members influence the organization's future and hold leadership accountable through the board. So having a vote creates engagement and responsibilities. Members stop seeing themselves as passive consumers and begin seeing themselves as co-creators of the organization. Their relationship shifts from what can I get from the business to how can we make the business better for everyone. That's democracy applied to the economy. So now I want to talk to you about the different types. I've already promised this. And the first two types of co-ops depends on who owns and controls that business. If the business is owned and controlled by the people that work there, The employees, if the employees own and control it, it's called a worker cooperative. A worker cooperative. In Cooperation Jackson in Jackson, Mississippi, they have several worker cooperatives in that economy. Equal Exchange is a large co-op. They provide chocolates and vegetables and coffee and teas. They buy and source from all around the world. They help to create this thing called fair exchange, that they pay the farmer a fair price for their products. There's a group in Chicago called Shy Fresh. Shy Fresh was started in 2020 by 5 formerly incarcerated folk. So they're not going asking people for business, for a job. They're creating their own jobs. They're creating their own business where they have a say, they have a voice. They share in the profit. Now they have gone and created, that business that they created was providing prepared meals to institutions. Those schools that stayed open needed food. Businesses that were open needed food. They prepared meals. Churches for institutions. They rented out a kitchen. Then they bought a kitchen. Then they created a housing co-op. Most folks that are formerly incarcerated have difficulty getting housing, difficulty with transportation and child care. So they created a housing co-op. They have two spaces in Chicago, the total of 9 units for the people that work in Shy Fresh. They've talked about starting a child care. They can co-op. They can start all of these different kind of co-ops that they own that benefit them. Worker ownership, wealth building. And when you get a voice, you get dignity. You get self-worth and better engagements. So if the business is owned and controlled by the employees as a worker co-op, there's all kinds of places to find out how you can start these. There's all kinds of places that will help you start them. Now, if the business is owned and controlled by the people that buys the products or services, i.e. the consumer, it's called a consumer co-op. If the consumer owns the business, all of those consumers that buy, consumer co-ops are housing co-ops. Most of the food co-ops are owned by the consumers. Rural electric co-ops. Rural electric co-ops have, I think they 75% of the counties in the U.S. Get their electricity from rural electric co-ops that started in 1930s with loans from the government. The government got their money back, but the government helped to start these companies that created electricity for these rural communities, because the large companies, the capitalistic companies, would not invest because they had there was a lot of distance and miles between homes, between the meters, and they could not make enough profit by providing the service. So co-ops came in, created these companies that provided service for these folks in the rural communities. So you end up with often a better product, local control, community investment into these. And when there's a profit, the business, through the members, can decide to give some of that profit back in the form of dividends to its members. That's called a patronage refund. So if it's owned and controlled by the employees, it's called a worker co-op. If it's owned and controlled by the consumers, it's called a consumer cooperative. And I've given you some examples, and you can go start your own and get all of these benefits. Now, there's values and principles of co-ops that if it's a co-op, then it operates through these values and principles. And the 5th principle is education, training, and information. So a co-op doesn't just work. You can't just get a group of 5 people like Shy Fresh and go start this thing and it works. No, there's a lot of education that must happen. And sometimes with that education happening, it takes a long time to get a co-op up and running. 5, 6, 7, 10 years. But when it gets up and running, it most likely will succeed. There's a book out by Dr. Jessica Gordon Imhard called Collective Courage. And she went back and looked at how we collectively, black folk, got together and created business. And it took courage to do that, particularly in slavery and Jim Crow. It took courage, but collectively we came together and we worked together to solve problems that we had in the community. It could be as simple as burial, having enough money to bury your loved ones. And mutual burial societies were created. It took education. Food co-ops were created. It took education. How do we work together? How do we form it legally? How do we operate? By electing a board of directors, and that board has certain responsibilities, and the board then hires management or a manager, and that manager hires the staff. And how and who has what responsibilities, and how you hold folk accountable to make sure they do what they're supposed to do. There is responsibility for being a owner. I talk about all of the benefits, but there are also responsibilities. Voting is 1. Holding the board accountable is 2. Holding management accountable is 3. There are responsibilities for membership. Paying your membership fee to get in. Okay, there's normally a membership fee. Often it is a small amount to get in, and you can pay over time. There's different ways that you can pay to become a member, and the members decide that. So the next 2 types of co-ops, we've talked about worker co-op, we talked about consumer co-op. The next 2 are normally businesses that are formed by either other business or members for a particular purpose. Often, farmers will get together and form this type of business. Artists will get together and form this type of business. So the first one I want to talk about is a purchasing co-op. Its function is to purchase. Purchase those goods and services that a farmer needs to produce whatever that farmer is going to produce. If they're going to produce vegetables, then they need seed, they need fertilizer, they may need a tractor, they may different kinds of things they need in order to produce whatever they are going to produce. If they're going to produce eggs, they need to buy their chicks. They need to know how to operate and feed and take care of the chickens. Okay, how you get the eggs and get them to the market, but they need to get what they need in order to produce whatever they're going to produce. So they'll form purchasing co-ops. Those purchasing co-ops are businesses that end up with relationship with vendors. They create contracts for the benefit of its members, for the benefits of those farmers, if it's a farming purchasing cooperative. If it's an artist purchasing co-op, they buy the needs of the artist. Okay. If they're jewelry makers, all of the things that it takes to make rings and necklaces, all of the different types of material, this purchasing co-op will go out and buy from vendors. Normally get it at a cheaper price and a better quality because they're buying in volume. They have more say and control over the vendors than if it was just one artist going or one farmer going to that vendor. Now they have collective power. Collective power with collective courage is awesome. That's a purchasing co-op. better buying power, economies of scale. The other type is a marketing co-op. And it's when those perhaps same farmers get together and create a business to market their products. They create a business that understand the different markets, understand the people that will buy the products that are being produced, and create better contracts for its members, which are the farmers, or the artists, or whomever. So in this marketing co-ops, some examples Cabot Creamery, Ocean Spray, they come together so they have a stronger market presence, they get better prices, and they get a shared branding. Cabot Creamery is 600 dairy farmers who bring their milk to Cabot locations, facilities, and then Cabot will sell the milk or create cheese or cottage cheese or yogurt. They create all of these other products out of the milk and then send that to the market under a brand of Cabot. But the milk can come from, again, 600 or so places. So these are the types of businesses that I have found, 4 types, where all the co-ops that I have seen fit within this. And I've already mentioned that they have values and principles. These values and principles, every co-op operates under them if they are a co-op. So the values are self-help. It's interesting, it starts with self. It's collective, people working together. But the first value is self-help. You get into a co-op to help self. But it's also self-responsibility. There is, as I've said earlier, there's responsibility if you're going to be a member. There's democracy, 1 member, 1 vote. There's equality, equity, and solidarity. This solidarity, again, is the group. Start with self. You want to benefit self and one's family, and you do this in a collective. Solidarity economy. You make decisions that are best for the group, but when the tide rises, everybody gets help. So you have self-help as the group, as the collective, improve, prospers. But I like the ethical values the most. Honesty, openness, social responsibility, and caring for others. Look at this. Honesty. What would it be like in our economy today if folks were working under honesty? Another word I like is integrity. You do what you say you're going to do. Integrity is real simple. What if our government worked with honesty? If politicians who on the stump said, I'm going to do X, actually did X. They were voted in and they did X. They had integrity. What would happen if folks were open, transparent? You could see their books. What happens in a business if everybody saw everybody's salary, what they were making? Social responsibility, is that the DNA of a co-op? What's happening in society? What's happening with climate change? What's happening in the environment? And if the business are concerned about those things, they would be concerned about their waste and how they leave the environment and the people that work with them, work for them. And then there's caring for others, which I like the most. Now we're going to take a break and we'll be back. And I want to talk a little bit more about the social responsibility, caring for others. And then we'll get into the 7 cooperative principles and more about why cooperatives matter today. We'll be right back. Please don't touch that dial. Welcome back, everybody. This is Vernon Oakes, and the program is Everything Co-op. As I mentioned earlier, we've been on the show now 13 years. We started going to be on 1 month, the month of October. And Karen Jackson, who is the person that runs WOL, she's the head manager there, I was on a show, and she came out and said to me I should have my own show, and that's where the idea came from. And my producer, my cousin, Pat Thornton, who I was on her show, which comes on Wednesday, the Thornton Business Hour, I was on her show talking about housing and co-op housing because I grew up in this whole co-op space and managing housing co-ops in D.C., so I went to Chuck Snyder and said, Chuck, we'd like to do this for a month, and we have to pay the station. So he gave us the money to do it a month. I liked it, he liked it, Pat liked it, and so I financed November and December, and then he came back for that next year, and they've been financing us every year. Not only have they financed us, they have given us advice. They have been our main cheerleader. They've just been a great partner in this venture of giving people information about cooperatives so that they can have a better quality of life. NCB's mission is to support and be an advocate for America's cooperatives and their members, especially in low-income communities. And guess where those low-income communities are more often than not? And they do this by providing innovative financial and related services. So you'll find low-income communities or low assets community in Black, brown, and Native American communities. But as I found out growing up in West Virginia, Bluefield, West Virginia, particularly in coal mining country, is poverty does not discriminate. You can be white, you can be black, you can be brown, you can be native. It does not discriminate. So NCB works in all communities. And quite frankly, that gets to the first principle of cooperation, that is voluntary and open membership. It says it doesn't make any difference your gender, your race, your religion, your political affiliation. It just doesn't make any difference about your age. If you want to be a member of a co-op, and if it's operating as a co-op, then you can become a member of that co-op as long as you take on the responsibility of membership. That's voluntary and open membership is that's the first principle of cooperation. And I'll talk more about those principles, but I can't say enough about National Cooperative Bank. And through these 13 years, I've asked people that I've interviewed, have you had an opportunity to work with them? And a fair number have, and report really positive results. Because what ends up happening in a co-op, because it's shared ownership, most of the time, those cooperators have low assets. We're talking about low-income communities, so they don't have collateral to put up. And most banks are concerned about getting their money back as their number one concern. Number two is getting the interest, because they don't survive if they don't make interest. They cannot get profit. So they take in money through deposits, and then they loan money out through notes and mortgages. And the interest that they get from the notes and mortgages have to be higher than what they pay on their deposits. That spread is where they make their money. So if a bank says, I'm going to focus on low-income communities and their assets are not there, then that bank has to be innovative. It has to be, and that's what NCB is. They have to be innovative because more often than not, if Shy Fresh is starting with 5 formerly incarcerated folks, I would bet you they have no assets. They have no collateral. And because it's owned by 5 people who, if there was one that had some collateral, would they pledge that collateral when they only own 1/5 of the business? I know I would want to only put up 1/5 of the collateral if I own 1/5 of the business, not 100% of the collateral if nobody else have any other collateral. So NCB has had to find innovative ways. And I've suggested, I haven't gotten this back that this is it, but a lot has to do with reputation. A lot has to go and look at the individual and see if they're honest, if they're transparent, if they care about their community, social responsibility, and if they care for each other. Those ethical principles of cooperation. So NCB has to look beyond collateral because too often they don't have the collateral. If they're financing a housing co-op, then that housing, multifamily housing, often is the collateral. You then don't go down and look at the individuals that live there to see what kind of collateral they have. If it's a 100-unit property, that 100-unit property becomes the collateral with those other intangible things like who are the people, how honest are they, how transparent are they, do they care about their community, that 100-unit property community and the greater community they live in. And that greater community is the whole planet, what it ends up being. Social responsibility, and how do they care for each other? Do they care for each other? So NCB has to go beyond the normal banking parameters. The normal banking parameters of you need money to make money. You need collateral in order to borrow money to make additional money. You have to go beyond that. And they've been doing that since the 80s. And they've been voted on in Washington Post as one of the best places to work because it is a co-op and it cares about people. And it cares about being honest and transparent and cares about the community here in D.C. and Virginia, the DMV, I should say. But in every community they make loans in. So NCB ends up being a great partner. And for 13 years. Can't say enough about them. They are a co-op and they operate with the cooperative principles and values, which makes them a great employer. The people that work there enjoy working there. So a question that comes to mind, imagine what America would look like if every business operated with concern for community as a core principle. What if every business in America, imagine for a minute what America would look like if every business operated with concern for community as a core principle. Not the core principle of how do I get the greatest return on investment, ROI, for my stockholders, but if the core principle was concerned for the community, what would America look like? Now, I want to suggest business will still seek financial success. You have to make money. You can't lose. You can survive and sustain yourself if you break even, but it would be difficult. You can't survive and sustain yourself if you lose money. So you have to make money. So that doesn't change if every business in America had its core concern for the community as a principle or the core principle. But it becomes to ask questions like, how does this decision affect workers? How many capitalistic businesses ask that question? How does this decision affect workers? How does this decision affect customers? You would think that would be one of the first questions. More often it's not. How does this decision affect neighborhoods? How does this decision affect future generations? That's the question you get in co-ops. When you have managers get paid bonuses by shareholder rate of returns, They're interested in quarterly profits. That's where their bonuses come from. Not from concern for community as a core principle. But if we could flip that, either by having more co-ops or more B Corps, those are corporations that are concerned for community, at least that's what they get incorporated under, we would likely see more affordable housing, better access to healthy foods, stronger local economies, more sustainable environmental practices, and greater civic participation. Too often in our communities, minority communities, you have people dumping in the water system, in the soil, in the air. So too often in these minority communities, black, brown, indigenous communities, where folks are dumping their garbage, businesses are not concerned about the community, only concerned about profit. It's cheaper to dump it in these communities than to ship it off someplace else and take care of the waste. So in our communities, you end up with more disease, more breathing issues, more strokes, more deaths earlier. So in our communities, in black and brown and native communities, you end up with less quality of life and less life, long-term quantity. And you can just look at the suburbs of Cleveland, of New York, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Chicago. You look at the suburbs where more white folk are, they may have 10 years more expected life. I've even heard of 20 years more expected life than inner city blacks, particularly looking at black men versus white men. So that black men, for all of the issues of discrimination and racism, end up with an expectant life of 10 to 20 years less than white men that live in the same sort of neighborhood, but out from the inner city in the suburbs. And if you do get gentrification like has happened in D.C., then whites will live in inner city, but that inner city changes. The environment changes. More tax dollars go there, and life expectancy improves. The quality of life improves. The health improves. So how do we get to where black, brown, and indigenous people, native people, have a better quality of life and a longer life? I go cooperation, cooperative businesses. You end up with a voice. You end up with more wealth through your salary and through dividends. And therefore you can get the quality of health that you need, health care, and get a better quality of life and a longer life. Oh no, I wouldn't have believed this when I first, before I knew anything about co-ops, I would not have known any of this conversation I'm having with you today. And even when I started learning about co-ops, because I started managing housing co-ops in Washington, D.C., okay, and then seeing the benefits and then learning about it, that it really gets down to this ethical value of caring for others. And the business cares for people that work there, that buys there, that live in the community. The members can decide how the profits are shared, how much stays in the business, how much gets to dividends, and how much is used in the community for social issues, whether that's education, If there's a teenage issue, addressing that issue. If there's a senior issue, addressing that issue. If there's an environmental issue, addressing that issue. Using the money that's made by the co-op to address those issues, being socially responsible. Now, let's go to the 7 cooperative principles. The first one we've talked about, voluntary and open membership. Just doesn't matter. It should not matter in a co-op. Unfortunately, when you take a business with a cooperative business and you place it in a society like America that has racism all through it, it says the greatest sin, too often we say the greatest sin America has is slavery and the way they've treated black folks. I would say that's probably the second greatest sin. The first one is how they treated Native folk. Very, very similar. They just take and take. The society, mainly white society, white men, took from the native, took their land, had the trail of tears, killed them off, gave them diseases, and still do. And the same thing with blacks. They took our labor, took our lives. So in these co-ops, and I've had the benefit of traveling in native territories on reservations with the Zuni and the Navajo, and some of them have it that co-ops is the way that's going to bring them out of their despair. Same thing in Cooperation Jackson in Jackson, Mississippi, or the Federation of Southern Co-ops, the 13 Black Belt states. How do we lift ourselves up? This thing of lifting yourself up by your bootstraps doesn't work when you don't have boots. But how do we come together with whatever we have, whatever skills and knowledge that we have? Our biggest assets in our communities is relationships. And that's hard to measure, to take to a bank and borrow money on. But relationship is the number one asset that we have. How do we take those relationships, build businesses, build economy, build money flowing through our homes and our communities, and getting some of it to stick through savings, through buying assets, watching those assets grow, and then taking those assets and helping the community, helping the family and the community. How do we create more co-ops to do that? So it's voluntary and open membership is number one. Number two is democratic member control. They had to put that one in there because some governments try to take control, particularly if they loan money. Okay. A lot of it has happened in African countries. But it could also happen here. We try to make sure that it doesn't through NA, National Association of Business, National Cooperative Business Association, NCBA. NCBA will get out and work with government entities, whether they're local or state or federal, to make sure that it's democratic member control. Still need support, like with rural electric co-ops. End up getting government loans to start the businesses, and then those loans were paid back. Democratic member control. One member, one vote. And then you have the third principle is member economic participation. That's that membership fee I was telling you about earlier. There is a membership fee to get in. In a limited equity housing co-op, that membership fee may be the same as 1 month's rent, the same as a deposit. And that 1 month's membership fee, or equivalent to 1 month's rent, may be able to pay it out over time. Most often it's wanted right up front. But if rent, if you will, was $1,000 a month, in a market rate housing, the membership may be $5,000, $10,000, $20,000. It does not have to be 1 month's rent. and more often than not, it's not. The Watergate Towers in D.C., there's 3 of them. They got well known by Nixon, but they're co-ops, and their membership fee was high. I looked at it at one point. Their membership fee was extremely high for me. Okay, that's member economic participation. Now, the flip side is, what I've also mentioned is, when there's a profit, you can get a dividend or patronage. So if you're working in a food co-op, you have your salary, and if it's a worker-owned food co-op or hybrid owned by both the consumer and the workers, then you can also get a dividend. Member economic participation. Then the 4th one is autonomy and independence. You got to have control over it. The members have to be able to vote and control the business. They make the decisions. Autonomy and independence. And I've already mentioned the 5th one, and that's what attracted me to co-ops first, was education, training, and information. My mother was a school teacher, and I've been a school teacher 12 years in my career. I like learning, and I like being in an environment where learning takes place, and that's in a co-op. Again, Dr. Jessica Gordon-Imhard's book, Collective Courage, said that these learning clubs is what normally started, and they didn't stop when they opened a business. No, that learning had to keep going. That's lifelong learning. The life of the co-op and the life of the individuals in the co-op, it is constantly learning. In a business, what you learn, there's all kinds of variables, there's all kinds of things that come up. Every season, whether that's the seasons of the year or, I don't know, different decades, you're going to have different kinds of things, and you have to continue to learn. That's the 5th principle. The 6th principle is cooperation among co-ops. Bob, that's powerful. P6, cooperation among co-ops. Then principle 7 is concern for community. So how do principles 6 and 7 resonate with today's challenges? So co-ops serve their members most effectively and strengthen the cooperative movement by working together through local, national, regional, and international structures. Today's challenges are often too large for any one organization to solve alone. Climate change, food insecurity, housing shortage, economic inequality, access to health care. There's 5 huge issues in our society in America and throughout the world. Climate change is throughout the world. But America contributes to it more than anybody else, our economy. So Principle 6 reminds us that collaboration is more powerful than competition. Working together is more important, more powerful than competing with one another. A food co-op can work with a farmer co-op. A credit union can finance a housing co-op. A worker co-op can purchase supplies through a purchasing co-op. This creates a cooperative ecosystem where organizations help one another succeed. Cooperation among co-ops. We can compete less and cooperate more. In a world that we live in, it rewards individual success. Michael Jordan, Michael Jackson, individual success. Cooperation teach collective success. Now, when you talk about concern for community, corporations work for sustainable development of the communities through policies approved by their members. Principle 7 says that business has a responsibility beyond profit. Cooperatives ask, are people striving? Is the environment healthy? Are young people finding opportunities? Are seniors supported? Is wealth staying in the community? Principle 7 resonates today because consumers are looking for ethical businesses, sustainable businesses, locally rooted businesses, businesses that create opportunity rather than extraction. Cooperatives are uniquely positioned to do this because their purpose is not maximizing shareholder returns. Their purpose is meeting human needs. Principles 6 and 7 may be the most important cooperative principles for the 21st century. Principle 6 tells us that our greatest challenges requires us to work together. Our greatest challenges requires us to work together. And Principle 7 reminds us that economic success means little if our communities are not striving. Together, these principles offer a vision for an economy built not only in competition, but also on cooperation, shared prosperity, and concern for future generations. That vision is why cooperatives matter now more than ever. So as we sign off tonight, I just want you to know that cooperatives matter more now than ever in the world that we live in, an economy we live in, and political situations that we live in. So we'll see you next Thursday. Please live cooperatively.